Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 114 of the Citrix Session. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. I had to hesitate. I just looked it up. Then we had a conversation slightly, 10 seconds worth, and I had forgotten. I guess that's because we've got so many of these that they're all kind of running together. Jeremy Myers is with us. Jeremy's the Director of Sales Engineering for the East Coast for Citrix. Jeremy, how's it going?
Fantastic. How you doing, Andy?
Good. From your perspective, should we do seasons, or should we just keep adding up the sessions?
Ooh, I like seasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I get it. The number, you know what? No, the podcast one of the podcasts I follow a lot is Windows Weekly out on Podcast Land, and they're up to like episode 1400 something.
Yeah.
I just made that up, but I don't know. I like that. Let's keep doing that.
All right. So quick side note on that one. I love what we do here. We get down to it. We cover the content and then we hang up, right? That Windows Weekly podcast, I can't listen to it anymore because it's 3.5 hours and the substance is only like 30 minutes.
Full disclosure, here's how I listen to it, because I do love the insight, especially around what's coming on Windows desktop, Windows 10, Windows 11, stuff like that, the hardware, which is great. And Mary Jo also covers some of the enterprise stuff, but you're right, that podcast is like 2 or 3 hours long. And I only listen to it as I'm coming and going to the gym each day. So I catch it in about 11-minute increments. And that's about enough. Yeah. But it takes me a week. It does.
You can never get through it. I mean, I try to listen on the plane. I'll take off and land, and I'm listening at super fast speed, and I still don't get through the thing because and I like what they do. One of my measurements for success and what we're doing here is hopefully someday they're going to reach out to me and ask me to join the podcast for just one episode on AVD or M365 or Windows 365. I know it's never going to happen, but that because I listened to it for so many years. Yeah. Bill Sutton is with us. Bill's the Director of Services at XenTegra. Bill, how's it going?
It's going great, Andy.
You staying busy?
Oh yeah, we're really busy, which is a good thing in many ways. So yeah, we're the team is pretty booked out and working hard.
So if you're listening to this and you're interested in a consulting or helping us with our managed service practice, reach out to myself or Bill and LinkedIn maybe, and let us know, because we're growing, and we work really hard to continue to recruit. Things are good, and we need more help. So if you're interested in working for a very focused end user compute digital workspace company, that's us, and let us know.
Yes, I would echo that. Absolutely, reach out.
So Jeremy, we got a topic we're going to cover in a minute, but you got rumor of me asking questions at the iGel Disrupt in New York last week. You were going to ask me about it. I told you to hold off. What did you hear happen?
Well, so listen, I didn't get to go to VMware. Is it Explorer?
Yeah.
Explorer, right? Yeah. So I didn't get to go to VMware Explorer. And then there was an iGel event last week up in New York City, where I think VMware also presented. So I was trying to wrap my head around. It sounds like there's an evolution of Horizon Cloud, I want to say. Maybe a little bit different than how it worked before, but I wanted to lean into that and just really understand what that looked like. So from what I gather, it's a model that's not unlike Citrix and our DaaS service, except for maybe it only covers, right now it's in Azure out of the gate, doesn't include things like gateway type service functionality, if you're familiar with the Citrix DaaS service. So I was just trying to understand what it looked like. What were some of the high notes there and kind of where they're headed. Obviously, as a competitor, I'm trying to understand. That's all.
Well, I think it's an interesting conversation because you guys have done this. I've done this. Citrix has done this, where you swing from application-centric conversations back to maybe desktop conversations, which if you've ever heard me make the argument, I think the Windows UI, aka the desktop, is the most widely used Microsoft application on the planet. And so the desktop's just an app that gets you to other apps with a convenient, UI that you're familiar with. But I think what a lot of folks are doing, including Citrix and VMware, is really getting conversations, trying to steer them back to the world of apps, because as the world moves more towards SaaS, modern apps, we were just talking about this in my management meeting, it's going to be important that players like Citrix, like VMware, like Microsoft, really stays relevant in that conversation between x86, legacy apps and SaaS-based modern apps. And I think a lot of the players in this space, including Citrix, is really trying to make sure the conversation around apps is not neglected, and that the world sees that's where we're all headed, even though there's been like this 10-year time frame where we try to just get people to desktops because that's what got them more successful quicker. So does that part make sense?
It does. And I guess, and maybe this is the last thing you just said, but why did we, and I don't mean like we as in Citrix or we as in the two of us, but why did we as an industry sort of pivot more towards maybe I hate to say VDI, but a full desktop as opposed to an application?
A hosted and presented virtual desktop.
Right. Yeah, that's a good way to say it.
And I say it that way on purpose because it's virtual, because it's running as a virtual object, a virtual entity. And it's also virtual because it's being presented virtually across a network. It's actually, when you talk about a virtual desktop, whether it's VDI or server based, it's two forms of virtual. It's virtualized as a machine, and then it's also virtualized as how it's delivered. That's why I argue all the time that the best name that Citrix ever had for one of its products was presentation server, because it truly was presentation virtualization.
You'll appreciate this then. So I had a conversation with a customer this week who said, and they were just delivering applications. I guess they've been doing that healthcare for many years, right? So that's not an unusual use case in healthcare. It's just, presenting the, the EMR. But they came to us and said, hey, we're thinking about doing VDI, right? And so can we do that? And I was happy to tell them that with their DaaS licensing that they own today, they could do VDI if they wanted to. So we kind of picked apart the use case. And Andy, I was probably talking about VDI, talking about Windows 10, maybe not so much Windows 11 at this point, but Windows 10 in my head for maybe 15 minutes before, we had the conversation around, well, scaling the back end, what does that look like? And I go, hey, if you're thinking about VDI, that's a single user operating system, that's going to have an impact on your resources on the back end. Yeah. As opposed to maybe a server-based OS, RDSH style, where you can get several users. And he goes, yeah, you were thinking about using Windows Server 2016. And I go, oh. So this 15-minute conversation about VDI, I didn't tell him this, was really just the same old thing we've been doing for years. And I didn't correct him because honestly, at the end of the day, wasn't super, super relevant. But listen, it's confusing. And, the whole idea of VDI is just it's a sort of a generic term.
Well, that's why I talk about it in terms of, digital workspace, and then you break that down to more desktop virtualization, whether it's VDI or server hosted, single session, multi-session. And so, Jeremy, your question was, why did we push people towards VDI for the past 10 years? And that's because all the complexities of, taking a server desktop and presenting that as a virtual or physical machine to the endpoint, and meanwhile decoupling the apps and delivering the apps through streaming or layering or presentation into that virtual session to then turn around and be virtually delivered again. All that got squashed when you did VDI, or it didn't have to, but it made it easy. If you just said, okay, that thing you do on the physical desktop, just do that on the virtual desktop on top of a hypervisor, and then present that to the endpoint. And what you have to know, Mr. Customer, different is different, but not that different. If you can just do that, there's a chance that you might be successful. And that's pretty much been why the last 10 years have been the year of VDI. Well, have been VDI above all else.
Got it. That makes sense. It's a learning curve thing, right? So I get it.
And that's the key, right? I mean, there's just so many different ways you can go left or right. And, okay, so the thing last week I was at, the biggest part of the presentation was around app virtualization of some type, not layering, not streaming, something in between that's supposed to increase the percentage of applications that you could virtualize and decouple from physical endpoints, virtual endpoints, server desktops, client desktops, physical, virtual, all at the same time, presented inside of VDI. That was the real topic, was the claim that you can now do that and have a positive impact for the administrator, yet not a negative impact for the end user. And that's what I was really asking about. Okay, if that's the case, then tell me how you're going to get both of those. Because our experience with like the Unidesk solution that Citrix bought, and cloud apps, cloud volumes, cloud apps, from VMware and others, has been, you can do that, and the administrator gets a win because now they have one package to update for everything, but the end user gets a little bit lesser of a user experience. And if that's the case, do I really want to go that route? I've got to weigh, one versus the other.
Okay, I got it. Listen, that is For whatever reason, I've had an app layering conversation come up a few times in the last 2 or 3 weeks, and I've got an opinion on my own, but we can come back to that.
What is it? Just get a high level. Should someone do it or should someone not do it?
Well, so it all boils down to, is the juice worth the squeeze? I think with app layering, you've got to decide that is going to be your method of packaging images, delivering, layering apps into a user's desktop. I mean, you've got to decide that that's going to be your approach. It can't be, I'm going to do a little bit of app layering and a little bit of what I used to do, because part of the whole app layering approach is, it's certainly packaging the apps, right? And so you can do elastic layers if you need to, but you can also do, the layered image, so the layered cake. And it's really tough to mix and match. And I would argue a lot of customers don't quite understand maybe where app layering makes sense. So you might be using a solution to build 1 or 2 images, and that might be a lot of uptick, a lot of administration just to support a couple of images. On the flip side, we've got hospitals, we've got organizations who have 15 images, and that might be an easy win, where now it's easier to package and update applications across a bunch of different images. But if you got 1 or 2, it's probably not worth it. I
had a customer up in Raleigh a bunch of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I fired. I mean, I literally had to fire the customer. They solved all their problems. Like, I was there 1 week and I came back like 2 weeks later, and they solved all their problem by using app layering, Unidesk at the time. And the problem they actually solved was their own administrative problem. And I'm in a meeting with their boss, and their boss is kind of beating me up on why this isn't done, the project isn't done. And I'm like, well, because we can't make any progress because you're solving the wrong things. And she's like, you're yelling at me about, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, hold on a second. Have you ever logged into the virtual desktop? Well, no, I've never logged into it. Okay, log into it. 7-8 minutes later, she still hasn't gotten a desktop yet. And all this layering madness is happening in the background. I was like, look, your guys focused on the wrong problem. It's all about user experience. Until we focus on happy users, let's forget about how we manage the application layers.
Spot on. It's spot on.
I literally got up, walked out, and told them, look, here's my number. You got it. Call me if you need to. For now, I can't work with this until you guys get on the same page as to what you're trying to accomplish.
All right, Bill. I think our rant is over.
All right. So I know Bill's got thoughts on this. Bill, take us home on this topic, and then we'll move on.
No, I mean, I can see it from both directions. I mean, as a technologist or from a technology perspective, I love the concept of app layering. But to Jeremy's point, if you're a small shop and you've got a limited number of apps, the infrastructure and knowledge that's required to implement something like that, no matter the vendor, it's a new way of doing things. And if you've got folks that are willing to invest the time and effort in understanding how to do it, understanding its use case, and it makes sense, sure. But for your average medium small customer that's delivering a desktop, it may not make sense. You need to look at the use cases, and you need to consider, to your point, Andy, the true end user experience. If it's going to significantly impact the login time or the performance of the app or something along those lines, then you need to consider the alternatives, whether that's a hosted shared app, whether that's a locally installed app. You need to consider the alternatives. My
take is, if it's going to have any impact on user experience, be careful.
Yeah.
I mean, the users are used to clicking an app, especially with SSDs these days, and like it launches in half a second. If it's going to go from 3 seconds to 8 seconds, be careful.
Right.
All right. Well, the blog that we chose to do today, fresh out today, from Monica Grismer, who's been great and on a bunch of these. I wish now that we started, I wish I would have waited for her to join it, but I think we can cover it very well based on the topic she's put together here. The title of it is On-Premises versus Cloud, which is best for your business solution? Jeremy, is she talking about the platform piece, like Citrix Cloud or Citrix DaaS? Citrix DaaS or Citrix CVAD, on premises versus managed in the cloud? Or is she talking about, is Monica talking about where the actual host desktops live?
You know what? I think that was the first question I had about this blog post is she talking about the platform itself? So Citrix DaaS as a management platform being delivered out of the cloud or hosted on premise, or are we specifically talking about, the workloads themselves? And as it turns out, maybe a little bit of both.
Yeah, probably a little of both. Bill, what's your thoughts after reading through this?
Yeah, after reading through it, I think it's a little bit. I think you're right. I think it's a little bit of both. I think if you scroll down a little bit to that, the pros and cons, it kind of covers a lot of it.
Yeah, there's a section where we're talking about IaaS and PaaS and SaaS and containers and things like that. I think that's where we kind of get into the nitty gritty, but yeah, it's a little bit of both.
So here's my overall take, and you guys tell me if you agree or disagree. Unless you can tell me why it shouldn't be, the management plane should be as a PaaS, platform as a service, hosted in a cloud and managed by Citrix and even accessed by the user through the Citrix access plane, unless there's a good reason, both from a technical and business, both really combined together. You guys agree with that at this point?
At this point, I would generally agree with that. I mean, there are exceptions, maybe, really high security environments or something along those lines. But generally speaking, I think when you think about the concept of where we're going today with SaaS apps and everything hosted in the cloud and managed by a third party, to the extent you can reduce the amount of components you have to manage on premises, you're going to reduce your risk, and you're going to reduce your the amount of the labor costs.
Right. And you increase your ability to scale across multiple places. I use places. It could be your private place. It could be your colo. It could be your partner's colo, which all of a sudden becomes cloud. It could be public cloud. It could be other types of public clouds.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think what's funny is, is in the blog post here, Monica talks about use cases for on-premise environments. And even in all three of these, she talks about low uptime requirements, high demand workloads, large numbers of devices and tools connected via the Ethernet. Even this is what confused me, because I read that and go, there's still a use case. I mean, if you've got, Citrix DaaS, the PaaS solution, right, the management solution, these are still relevant. So, it looks like we're talking about on-premise workloads as opposed to on-premise management. But either way, I would say, governance is probably the biggest one. But then I would argue if you were using the Citrix management plane, it actually makes governance a little bit easier. In fact, we've got a scenario where governments, a lot of times we're talking about data sovereignty, and this makes it easy, right? Yeah. The idea that you can place these workloads wherever they need to sit. I do have customers who have told me that their Citrix, I'm using air quotes here, right? Because they're talking about the management plane too, can't connect to the internet. And I'm not saying that that's not true, but that's a highly niche scenario that a customer in some cases has chosen to do as opposed to required to do. I get it. Sometimes, you're just kind of fed the requirements, but even in that case, it's a small percentage. So I'm finding, in a majority of use cases, the DaaS management stack in the cloud makes sense.
Yeah, put a number on that. What percentage of customers does platform as a service for managing your Citrix environment? You use Citrix generically there. Well, give me a number, Jeremy.
All right, so I'm going to exclude public sector because I just don't understand that customer base. So
hold on,
federal government.
Sorry, let me ask the question differently. But technically, thinking technical only, what percentage of customers, forget about the money conversation, that's coming up next, but when it comes to Citrix as a platform as a service versus on-premises, give me a number.
What was the question again? Number of folks who have deployed?
No, what percentage of customers should, if they're going to consider Citrix, either they already have it or they're going to buy it, be considering it as a service, platform as a service, because it meets their technical needs better versus going with on-premises?
99%.
Okay. 99. Bill, what's your number?
I would have been lower than that, but I would have considered, I would have probably been in the high 80s.
Okay. So somewhere between 85 to 99%. Yeah. I don't disagree. It's somewhere high. Now, you asked me 3 years ago, I'd have given you something much lower, 50-50 even. But at this point, you've got to convince me why platform as a service technically doesn't make sense. And keep it in mind, we can always use some type of brokering technology, a Citrix Gateway, a NetScaler ADC to handle the traffic and just manage the thing from the cloud. So Jeremy, when you gave us 99%, you're keeping in your back pocket that you can have the traffic still flow, not necessarily in the cloud, but be managed from the cloud.
Exactly. I mean, listen, NetScaler, I'm going to eat my words on this because I'm sure someone's going to say they don't want to manage a NetScaler, but having a NetScaler on-prem, having a storefront server on-prem, it's not a lot of management there outside of maintaining the NetScaler from a security perspective. Certainly Windows from a Windows perspective with storefront, but I think a lot of the challenge with managing an on-prem Citrix environment, at least from a management stack, is things like the databases, the DDCs, those components. That's the heartburn sometimes on upgrades. That's why we talk about doing parallel upgrades is, if the database goes sideways during an upgrade, if the DDCs do a half upgrade as you're in between, that's the work. And so knowing that that's the brains and knowing that we have an offline mode, if you lose connectivity to the cloud plane, not that Citrix Cloud goes down, but what if your internet connection went down, right? So let's differentiate there. But, if there's any reason that you've been offline and you can't contact the cloud, there's a scenario where it still works. Do you lose some things? Sure, right? You can't make changes, but your users should not be impacted. That can be architected. And I think that's important to understand.
Here's another pseudo technical reason. How many customers, Jeremy, do you have you run into across your time period that, they didn't have a true test environment because they never took the time to build out a second total environment? The best they had was a delivery group or two where where they throw garbage workloads and try to figure out if they'll work or not. This in the cloud, all of a sudden you can say, okay, I've bought 1,000 licenses. I'm going to take 20 of them or 5 of them or whatever and put it over here in this separate environment. And it truly is, my test environment.
Yeah. And there's actually some interesting things with that as well. So, and if you were to transition all those licenses, you can carve out and create a separate org ID just to be test dev. And, we've got a tool in the automated config tool that will let you migrate over configurations if you need to. So I think, it opens up a lot of possibility around test dev that maybe folks pushed back on when it was on-prem because just the effort involved in standing things up.
Yeah. Bill, before we move away from the platform side of this conversation and more into the workloads and infrastructures, anything else you want to add?
No, I think Jeremy hit the nail on the head there, particularly as it relates to the availability of the environment. We sometimes hear customers that are concerned about going to cloud and all into the cloud using gateway service and things like that, about what happens if gateway service goes down. Can my user sitting at home, or can my user sitting in the office where the data center is, or connected to the data center, can they still access my applications? And the answer is yes. There are generally speaking that it's yes. If you have connectivity to that data center, then there are techniques that Citrix has developed that can enable the availability of those resources. So I think that argument, which may have been much more valid 12, 18, 24 months ago, is not nearly as valid today.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the things that's made that number tick up more into the 90 range. Yeah, I guess one of the things to clear up, and we will talk about it maybe here in a minute, but when you use Citrix DaaS, the platform as a service piece of it, the data that's actually residing in the public cloud at that point under the Citrix tenant is not much other than like metadata type stuff. So unless you've got some massive security requirements on that part of the data, you're fine.
Yes, that's true.
All right, so for the rest of this conversation, let's assume we're talking about the workloads running in either on premises, which be your private data center or your private data center colo, or in a partner's environment data center like us, that all of a sudden becomes cloud-ish or cloud-like, or in the public cloud. Does that make sense? Why I break those out that way?
It does. That makes total sense for sure.
Jeremy, is it cloud or clouds?
Clouds.
Clouds. It's plural. The whole world calls it cloud. It's not the cloud. Microsoft would like for it to be the cloud, but it's clouds, right? It's Amazon, Microsoft, GCPs, XenTegra data center on the East Coast, XenTegra data center on the West Coast, Rackspace data center. All those are clouds. Bill, give us the typical smart aleck response to what is the cloud.
Just somebody else's data center.
That's it.
Somebody else's computer doing the same thing yours did. You just don't have to make the upfront investment and maintain it anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I would argue the only difference between that and a colo is sometimes with the colo, you have more insight into what's going on. And so this is a vCenter server, or just because they've kind of opened up the hood and shown you. But for the most part, again, it's just someone else's data center. That's it.
Well, and I guess specifically, I was asking that question. You guys answered it. What is a public? What is a cloud? What is a IaaS cloud? And then there's PaaS cloud, and there's SaaS cloud, and then there's DaaS cloud, and then there's also DaaS cloud, which is device as a service. I mean, your word cloud is just way overused for things, and that's fine when you're having a high level marketing mind melt. But when you're really trying to have a conversation technically about what are we talking about here, you should never use the word cloud all by itself.
No, you're correct. So this piece here goes through the pros and cons, specifically those workloads and considerations. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the first one. The first one is resource deployment for on-premises. Notice I keep harping on premises because people say on-prem, they drive me nuts. On premises, it's prim and proper, not premises. Okay, so resource. Sorry, I cut off on Andyism there. Resources deployment. So for the definition of on premises is resources are deployed in-house. I don't know what that means. In-house, I guess that means your own private data center on your own private gear, right?
You probably own the underlying hypervisor is probably what it means.
Yeah.
Hardware.
Yeah.
Yeah. You own the hardware it's executing on. That's how
we'll call it. Yeah. As opposed to the cloud where you're basically accessing any of that through some sort of managed portal is essentially what it is.
And I love what Monica's done here. The answer for what is the resources deployment definition when we're talking about cloud is resources are deployed on a third party's, I'll put the apostrophe S there, servers, which again, that's all cloud is. It's just somebody else's infrastructure cloud. It's just somebody else's servers that they provide a layer of management and accessibility to. You just don't buy them and maintain the blinking lights.
Yep.
So the next line down talks about cost. Says on-premises requires upfront investment, whereas most cloud providers use pay-as-you-go model. I guess that's MRR, AR, OpEx conversation.
Yeah. So let me ask you guys this because you're in this space. So from requires upfront investment. A few years ago when I was selling servers, I did see where some of the vendors were looking at providing, I guess they're scoping out subscription-based hardware, which I think maybe I can't wrap my head around that because I haven't sold it. Yeah. But I mean, what does that look like? I feel like I've had someone from Nutanix tell me recently that they're going subscription, and maybe I've misunderstood how that worked. But I've also heard maybe Cisco and HP doing the same thing. Like, how does it work?
Let me try, as the partner eventually brings all this together. The hardware guys have their model of subscription, which is really you just pay for however much consumption of the hardware you're using. Maybe you get a piece of hardware that's got this really high scale, but you're only paying for what percentage of that physical hardware that's being used, or maybe you have the ability to go into a month-to-month model where you get hardware comes and goes as needed. HP's is called GreenLake, Lenovo's is called TrueScale. So when you're talking to the hardware guys, that's their conversation. When you talk to a Nutanix, it's really more around monthly subscription model of licensing, where you probably pay more overall, but you get to do it by the month. And so you either scale it up or scale it down, or maybe you do it by the year. But it's two different conversations depending on are you talking to a hardware company or you're talking to a software company? In some cases, the Lenovo's and the HPs of the world can bring it all together under one thing, but it's pretty much just subscription OpEx type of model for software and hardware.
Okay. So in a sense, there's a little bit of maybe pay as you go, but it's probably not as flexible as a cloud's provider, third-party server provider.
It's not as responsive to your changes, I wouldn't think, and it's
not as elastic, right?
Okay.
Yeah,
I got it.
And remember, elastic can mean stretching out and also contracting. Super easy to do that in true public cloud offerings.
I got it. Okay. Well, I guess, and then the next one here, right? So we talk about the limits.
Hold on. I want to stay on the cost one because there's a conversation to be had around the cost one, which is it's important to consider too. When you go to a cloud provider model, you are committing to them that you are going to spend money with them every month and you are going to pay your bill. And if you don't, they're going to tell you, hey, you didn't pay your bill. We're going to turn you down a little bit, or we're going to turn you off. Versus when you go with the investment up front, you either paid it up front and then you decide whether you keep paying for it because it's now 9/10 of the rule of law, like possession, right? You own it, you have it. It's a lot harder for somebody to turn you off. There's leverage that goes on when you move to a true cloud model.
Oh, and there's something else too, right? So I don't pay a cloud bill myself, but I talk to customers who I mean, there's a different economy to the cloud in terms of like how you get charged and how you can reserve instances and how you contract with the vendor and things like that, right? So, I've found in a lot of cases, I've got customers who just had no idea that they should be reserving instances on VMs and have been paying much more than necessarily they need to. Have you guys gotten to situations, has XenTegra gotten into situations where you've helped evaluate that for a customer and made recommendations around saving costs?
Yeah, I jokingly say that our good customers don't put any of their desktop and app virtualization in the public cloud because they don't get exactly the machines they need and they pay way too much for it now. Reserved instances or the ability to live migrate instances using some of the softwares that's out there has made that much more doable. And we do have some customers that do use public cloud, but we're most of the time our really good customers that we're helping a ton, they put their stuff in our data center or we put a cage in their colo. And at that point, it's our stuff, it's our software, our servers. Therefore, you could argue that is cloud, but it's not like the true public cloud providers would ask you to define it.
I got it. I mean, so there's an obvious question to ask, but maybe when we get to the end of this section here, but we'll come back to that.
So I'll let Bill respond to that too, but I will tell you a quick story. XenTegra has the ability to, if you said, XenTegra, I want this stuff out of my cage, therefore I want to go cloud, but I want to do what fits my needs the best. We can do with what we do with one of our banks up in the New York area. We actually put gear in the cage right beside theirs. And we also replicate that to our data center in Atlanta. And so they got the true, they got cloud. They got, it wasn't theirs anymore. They just have a connection, cross connection over to our cage, redundant cross connections. Therefore, it became cloud to them, but we created no additional latency because we're still in the same building, like literally 12 feet away, but they accomplished the goal of getting it off their stuff. Therefore, they moved their desktops to the cloud, a cloud.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo what Andy said. I mean, we have a lot of customers that want to go to the public cloud, and some will dip their toes in it and test it out. But a lot of them end up back with some form of alternate cloud, whether it's their own private cloud or it's the XenTegra cloud or it's some other colo that they're leveraging. We do have some that end up in the public cloud, and most of them are happy with it, but you have to frame it and architect it in a way that helps minimize those costs. Things like auto scaling and tools like reserved instances and those sorts of things that can help keep the costs in check for those customers.
Yep. And that's where tools like the Citrix Autoscale comes into play big time. Using non-persistent images to scale up and scale down and, make sure you balance out. I mean, you literally could think about, okay, I've got, 100 desktops running over here, 100 over there, this cloud, that cloud. And at any point in time, I can just determine where I want the workloads to go based on who's charging me the most or the least.
Well, and so, I'll skip forward then here, right? So we're going to talk about scalability, data security, and compliance here. But, I think the ultimate question is, Andy, where am I putting my workloads? My EUC workloads is probably the best question.
Well, and there's lots of things to ask to determine where you want to put it. Honestly, Jeremy, what I've seen a lot is that whoever we're talking to at like the CIO level, he's looking for a resume builder. So he's moving everything to the cloud. And you're like, why? It's like, well, that's the way to do it. And that's how we're going to do it. And then he does it. Customers spending a fortune on, infrastructure as a service, hosting those desktop or app workloads. And 6 months later, he went and got a job somewhere else and put that on his resume as to how he did that. And you're going, well, that's great, but I don't know why you decided to do that. The logic was just to follow the herd and get your next good job.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I think Bill said it best when he said it depends, right? We have customers who move to the cloud for that exact reason, and then the CIO leaves, or someone got the bill and realized that that's not sustainable. And so they end up moving from a cost perspective, they move the workloads where it makes sense, right? And I think that's the advantage. But and what plays into that is certainly scalability. In some cases, supply chain has limited the scalability of the on-premises model for sure. But then data security, right? So where's the data need to live? So I think that plays into it. And compliance is probably closely tied to that. But it's interesting. I don't know in some cases that all four of these are really considered in a lot of cases. And so it ends up being more of a, we need to be dynamic, and maybe DR goes to the cloud. Maybe that's a good place to start. But
Interesting.
I love that all four of these were called out, because these should be what we ask about in our cloud conversations.
Well, keep in mind, it doesn't necessarily have to be DR when we're talking about EUC workloads. We can put our workloads in multiple places because of the platform as a service concept we're talking about here at the same time. And so users can literally log in today and get one over here. The next person logs in and gets one over there. And then if you said, is it working? Well, yeah, it's working. I know my recovery is working because they're using them simultaneously and nobody even knows it's happening.
Yep. Okay. That's a good list.
Bill, do you have examples of customers that are simultaneously using more than one backend and not even realizing it?
Yeah, well, in a lot of cases where they have their own private data centers that are going between them, maybe East Coast, West Coast, and the users, or maybe even East Coast, Central, West Coast, the users may not even realize it. We also have some that are doing, or either are already doing or looking to do, kind of what I referred to as bursting in the cloud. And that is where the user doesn't really know whether they're on the on-prem data center or whether they're in a cloud running their desktop to cloud. It shouldn't matter to them as long as they have access to their data. And we do have some customers that are doing that today.
And historically, when it would show up that it was going to be a problem is when they go to run that application inside that desktop or on that app server, and it needs to talk to some, back-end server. Okay, where's that thing sitting at? But now with these direct connects and the SD-WAN capabilities and just the raw bandwidth and latency, things that have been enhanced, not 100% solved, but enhanced, is, do you even notice that it took an extra half a second to launch and get that data or not?
Well, maybe not, but I think it's something that still has to be considered, right? Because that's always been the golden rule of end user compute, is you've got to put that front end close to the back end for that experience, to your point, right? Originally, which was that anything that impacts the user experience needs to be challenged, right? So, I think that's got to be a part of the architecture. Is the latency going to be worth it? Depending on the application, it depends.
Yeah, I always use the example, if you have kids and you're going to travel for Christmas, where are the kids going to be? They're going to be at grandma's house. Well, where should the presents be?
Grandma's house.
Grandma's house. If not, that's going to be a really bad Christmas morning.
For sure.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
All right. So scaling up, scaling down, clouds, bring that into the mix for you. Data security, we talked about, the IP that's associated with the metadata with the platform as a service. Let's just hit this one again real quick, guys. So security of the data that's going to be in that environment, or at least transferred through that environment, that should be part of what you decide, may help you decide on where those workloads should run, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, certainly from a access layer for sure, but then secondly, listen, not all data is the same. Most companies, most organizations tier their data, and I don't mean in a backup scenario, but just in terms of security. And so I think that's got to be considered as well. And then that bleeds right into compliance, where there are countries who require data to be in certain locations, certain locales. I mean, that's GDPR in a nutshell.
Right.
And so, yeah, that leads right into the next one, compliance. If compliance says it has to be here and you just follow their rules to the letter of whatever the rules are, then there's your decision criteria right there.
It is. Yep.
Okay. So before we move on to the next section, I'm going to do another question for you, Jeremy. Give me your answer first. What percentage of compute will end up in the public clouds, and what percentage of the compute will have to end up somewhere other than the public cloud, in your perspective?
Okay. Well, I'll start off by saying that most, it appears right now, to be on-prem still. So I'll go 60-40. I would have said 80-20, because that's the sort of the running industry joke. 80% on-prem, 20% in the cloud, but I think it probably skews down a little bit. So I'll say 60-40.
So 60% on 60%
premises,
not in the public cloud, but somewhere else, and then 40% in the true public clouds.
Correct.
Okay. Bill, your thoughts?
I would say this. I was initially, my first thought when you asked the question was 50-50. But I think, Jeremy's probably right that it will end up being more like 60% on-prem. I mean, what we're finding today with customers that want to do, that are running an older version of Citrix 7.15 or even 19.12, and they want to go to the latest, they're staying on, most of them, or many of them, are staying on-prem. We are finding that some are going to the cloud. Some of them are we're doing on-prem and they're evaluating the cloud, so they're not really ready to make the leap. And when I say the cloud, I'm talking both workloads and the control plane. So I think there's still some reluctance, and I think a lot of it has to do with not really understanding it, A, and B, the cost.
Well, and to be clear, I was talking about compute just in general, not just desktop, not just end user, but just in general compute, like what we currently have for x86 workloads, server based, whatever, not desktops, but client server applications too. What would you say how much is going to go in?
It's probably going to be around 60-40. I mean, because I think you're encompassing in that those situations where the customer's IaaS today, but they might be PaaS or even SaaS tomorrow.
That's a good point. Yeah. I mean, take your ERP, right? If you've been running that on premises for years, your migration project probably looks like, I'm not forklifting to the newest version sitting in a cloud infrastructure somewhere. It's probably a SaaS app at that point. Yeah. It's probably Oracle Cloud or something like that. I don't know, but that's probably a different delivery model.
All right, so let's get through the rest of this. We're going to run out of time, but so the next section is what is an on-premises environment? What are the pros? The pros that are listed. I'll run through these and then you guys can comment. Infrastructure control, so we control where these workloads are running. Security, we know that it's within our four walls. Of course, it's hooked up to a cable that takes it out to the rest of the world, but that's a whole other topic. Compliance, we go by our rules and regulations, and then efficiency, low latency. Any of those that you guys want to highlight or disagree with as far as pros of on-premises environments?
I think this is why the on-premises versus cloud, are we talking about infrastructure, just workloads only, or are we talking about the management stack? Confused me a little bit because, with on-premises environment, all of this is true. Infrastructure control, share, right? Security, I think you could get that out of the cloud version of just the PaaS version, the DaaS service, if you will, from Citrix. Same thing for compliance and efficiency, just low latency, close to users. So, I don't disagree with any of this, but, this is where it confused me a little bit because you can get all of this out of a SaaS delivered, Citrix service.
Oh, no, I agree. I don't really have anything to add to that, what Jeremy said.
It's just a new way of thinking, right? So going back to Jeremy's comments around security, I mean, if I put it up there and then I turn on all the bells and whistles that exist up there, and know that, all the bells and whistles that exist up there, do I get better security? Potentially. It's just because it's in my four walls and, I don't have all these tools turned on to look at it. That doesn't mean it's better, more secure.
No, you're absolutely right. And so, I would argue, and listen, I got to understand what your security posture is and like your approach to security as an organization. But, honestly, being SaaS delivered might make you more secure. I think that's a smaller footprint to manage. You get a lot of the same. I mean, you're still managing your data, your workloads themselves. So, that's a tough one. I think it's equal there for sure.
Yeah. All right. So the cons listed for on-premises is scalability, both up and down. Infrastructure costs. Somebody's got to break out the check and at least commit to it or pay for it up front. Maintenance. Now you've got that IT guy that is back to swapping out hard drives and other things, worse things. Security. You've got both physical and network and other technology related securities that you're on the hook for all by yourself. And then reliability and having a team that you can trust to keep these things up period. Bill, you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of these make sense. So the one that I would highlight is really the third one, maintenance. And I would argue that what we've seen anyways is a lot of organizations have scaled back their IT staffs over the past couple of 3 years. And what I mean by that is the folks are really more focused on what it says here, maintenance and updates. So it's accurate, but being able to run the environment, to understand how the environment interacts with the rest of the environment, kind of what I would call a higher level of knowledge and capabilities. We're finding that a lot of that has gone to the public cloud vendors or to partners or folks like us. The customers don't often some customers don't often seem to have the real skill set that they did 5-6 years ago about end user computing. And so that's definitely a con of an on-premises environment. You really need to understand your environment to manage it. And if you don't really have that fundamental understanding of how it works and how the pieces interact with one another, then that can be a real challenge for maintaining it.
Bill, you think it's going to be hard to find the next generation of employee that understands how to go add a riser board to a system board?
I know exactly what you meant when you said that, which is that going to be a dying breed?
I mean, change your oil. My car doesn't have oil. I can't change the oil. What are you talking about? Well, this thing we have sitting over here still has oil, and I need you to change it. Okay, good luck.
Right. Exactly.
Jeremy, any call outs on the cons that are listed there?
I think infrastructure costs. I mean, it's a capital expenditure versus operational, right? And so I think that's what it boils down to. And it's much easier. It's much easier to buy up front and then try to depreciate for sure, but you might end up buying more than you need. And that's hard for a lot of organizations to predict these days. And that's pretty much across the board. So I think with a sort of a subscription model to the cloud, to clouds, to things like that, even though it changes month to month, it ends up being a little bit more predictable. And I think that's what organizations appreciate about that model. Now, granted, sometimes the accounting hasn't caught up, so I'll still bump into customers they'll tell me we only do capital expenditures. We don't do OpEx. And I go, that's not true. But because a lot of what you're buying right now is OpEx, but it does take some organizations a little while to come around for sure.
Yeah. I got to go back to this one. Jeremy, you said you don't have any cloud that you pay for. You have Netflix, right?
Well, man, I have a ton of cloud.
Yeah, you have a ton of cloud, right? And I mean, you didn't have to buy that what used to be $600 DVD player. Or, by now you can get them for $60. But my point is, we all have cloud, but we're choosing to go that way for the conveniences, as well as the lack of not having to pay for. I bought my son. I had to buy a new Xbox. Mm-hmm. By the time I was done, it was $600.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
I don't
listen,
know if it even plays DVDs.
It does. It plays Bluetooth these days too. But the one thing that used to give me a little bit of heartburn is, do you guys ever buy Microsoft Office? Like for the house?
Oh yeah.
And not like the student edition, and not like the $15 version that maybe you got through work, but just you buy it for your house. I mean, if you wanted the version that you used at work, it was $300, which is insane. And now I'm paying $9 a month. I could pay it yearly, but I'm happy to do $9 a month because I like the idea of being able to turn it off. Is it cheaper if I buy a year in advance? Sure. But I also like the idea that, listen, it's $9 a month. I got 5 devices that all have Office, and over the course of 3 years, it's more expensive. But man, it's just walking into like CompUSA, if you guys remember that place.
Yeah.
And just dropping some coin down on Microsoft Office once every 3 years is just,
so
I don't want to go back to that.
There's the convenience, as well as there's the costing out model, the OpEx model. And here's the flip side of that. Jeremy, when in your life do you anticipate not paying for Microsoft Office under the current model?
I mean, I don't see a time, unless we just change what we do from an application perspective. I'll probably do it for a long time, forever.
And do you put your personal like pictures and stuff up in there?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's going to happen? You're going to keep paying for it until you're gone, and then you just wonder.
It's sticky. It's sticky.
Right before you die, make sure you download all those pictures and give it to somebody else to put up in theirs.
Exactly.
Sorry, Bill. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, yeah, I do the same. I mean, I'm almost ashamed to admit that until like February, March of this year, I was still using Outlook 2010 on my home computer. And I finally got to the point, this is just crazy. So and then I have older children who want to be able to use OneDrive and things like that. So I finally just bit the bullet and bought the subscription, like Jeremy said. And we moved from paying for a cloud-based storage place for our pictures to OneDrive. So I mean, and to your point, yeah, I'll be using that thing until either it goes away or I go away.
Yeah.
Can you even buy Microsoft Office outright?
Yes.
Is that still a thing? You can. You can. Here we go. Buy Microsoft Office
like
Home and Business 20. It's $250.
Okay.
Is what it is. Yeah. Hey, and it's a one-time purchase for one Mac or PC.
Right. Yeah. I've got 4 machines in my house, so that's $1,000. Right.
There you go. Okay.
All right. So last section of this blog from Monica says use cases for on-premises environments. It's almost like number 1 and number 2 contradict themselves. You have low uptime requirements. Therefore, you can get away with on-premises. And the next one, number 2, is you have high demand workloads.
Graphics.
So I guess that's performance. Okay, graphics, things that just become cost prohibitive in the cloud.
Yeah. I mean, let's be clear. You can do high demand workloads out of, Amazon, Azure. I'm assuming GCP. I haven't dived into that one, but they're not cheap.
XenTegra.
XenTegra. Yes. Yeah. See what you did there.
Like we almost force every customer to have some type of GPU because we know their end user experience is going to be improved.
You know what? I haven't talked about hardware GPU in a long time. I'd love to revisit what that looks like at some point. There was the Iris chip. There was obviously NVIDIA. I think AMD was doing something for a while. That might be something to revisit at some point.
I think we're all in NVIDIA these days. I don't think this stuff ever end up materializing.
Nothing else to go.
But I don't get involved in that. So, okay, you got low uptime requirements, which, look, I ran entire data centers with single servers with, redundant disk controllers.
Mm-hmm.
What we think of high availability today is so much greater than what we used to. But at the end of the day, if you're not taking advantage of the greatest ways of being redundant and highly available, then you're potentially letting the organization down. So it is real. So I just wonder, when Monica says low uptime requirements, is there a number you can put on that?
Yeah, I think this is really the smallest of the small. If if you want to have your infrastructure in a closet in your main office, then and you can handle a power outage or maintenance or such, then maybe you can do it in a local office versus putting it in a colo or something. I think that's really what it says here, what she's saying here.
Yeah. Last one is your organization has a large number of devices and tools connected via Ethernet.
Yeah, that's keeping it work. Especially manufacturing, having some sort of, end user compute workload sitting in a regional location makes sense. What's interesting is I think we enable that more out of the Citrix DaaS service, because trying to do this with on-prem infrastructure, zoning out different locations didn't make a whole lot of sense. Whereas the way this architecture works is putting cloud connectors in a regional manufacturing facility. It's pretty easy to do.
Well, first thing that pops up in my head when we get to that point is, okay, sounds like we're now talking about edge. Where does edge computing fit into on-premises versus cloud computing?
That's true.
I think that's exactly what we're talking about here, because you're going to have some manufacturing facilities and other types of facilities that are going to be in very rural parts of the country that may not have really high speed or decent speed access even to the platform layer or the control plane. And that's where you really get into the edge computing question about, do we want to deliver that using edge technologies in that location that may be connected to the mothership, so to speak, but at a very high latency or a low bandwidth connection.
Yeah. Well, guys, I just made an executive decision. We're going to stop, and because we need to cover the rest of this, and I don't want to be Paul Thurrott and talk for 4.5 hours.
I was thinking the same thing, by the way. I was like, we're going to turn this into Windows Weekly. It'll be a 2-hour episode of good content.
We'll just do part 1 and part 2, right?
Yeah, well, that's what we're going to do. We're going to pause here, and we'll come back next week and jump into the pros and cons of cloud computing after a brief recap on what we covered so far. But guys, I appreciate it, and hopefully this is a cliffhanger. I'm just imagining the Dukes of Hazzard, the General Lee car going from one side of the bank to the other, and people are just going to be waiting all week for part 2 of this.
It's pretty funny.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining, and we will jump on the same topic next week. Maybe Todd will be with us, and he can just tell us everything we did was correctly right or wrong, one way or the other.
Or completely wrong. Yeah. Awesome. All right, pals. Good to see you again.
Yep.
See you next week.
See you next week. Thanks.